Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 204 of the Unsecurity Podcast. I'm your host, Oscar Meeks, and I am joined, as always, by the wonderful Brad Nye. Hey, Brad, how's it going today?
Going well. Got to lead off with the weather, right? No.
Yeah, what's the weather report, man?
It is so smoky here. Yesterday, we were at bordering on air quality purple, which is like extremely unhealthy for all. So those Canadian wildfires are it smells like a campfire outside.
Yeah, it's not as bad for us here, but we had it last week. And it's kind of cleared up a little bit in my neck of the woods, which is crazy. Like, we're pretty far south compared to you, that it was all the way down here. I heard a really interesting statistic last week for New York, and there's significant air quality problems in New York right now. And this was as of last week. I don't know if it's still true, right? But when they were at their peak, they said that just being outside throughout the course of a day was the equivalent to smoking 7 cigarettes.
Yeah,
it's insane, right?
Crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff. They had to cancel some baseball games because of it, and all kinds of crazy stuff, man.
Lots of youth sports were canceled yesterday because it was so bad out.
Wow.
Yeah, played sports outside.
Yeah, well, it's a bummer. It's cleared up down here. It's beautiful in my neck of the woods. We've had a really nice, cool week so far, but I just got back from a bike ride, and it's definitely warming up out there now. We're probably mid-80s again.
Nice.
Just telling Brad before we started recording, I tried to sneak in a bike ride before the recording today, and now I'm just trying to stop sweating at this point.
That's the only downside to exercise.
Yeah, right. Stupid sweating. Yeah, so we had a great week last week. It was cool. So Brad and I got to attend our all-company party in Minneapolis, and it was so cool getting to see everybody and outside of a workspace, see everybody too. It was fun to see everybody let their guards down, have a good time, and the party was just fantastic. It was so awesome to get to see so many faces, and we've added so many new faces to our team that just felt wonderful to get everybody in the same room and everybody really take the time to get to know each other and spend some time together.
Well, and I was talking to one of the guys on the sales team, and he said, he and you, the two of you had the same conversation that he and I had, where it's like, I feel like I know you because I see you every week on the
right.
And I'm like, who are you? Oh, okay, I know that name. But
right.
There's so much of that where I'm like, are you an employee or are you the plus one? But all the employees know us because we're on, presenting all the time.
Right. Yeah, it's so good to be able to put like a name to a face, but more importantly too, to really understand their personality, right? And I always talked about this. I've worked remotely for a really long time, even pre-COVID. Before I was at FRSecure, I've been in remote positions for a long time. And it always changes your perspective when you're able to interact with someone in person. It's easy when you're just in this digital realm of communicating through calls, through text, and even video to not really humanize someone, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I always feel like when you have that physical face-to-face connection, really does wonders in humanizing. And then I think as a result of us humanizing people more, it increases our empathy and our understanding, and you're able to really connect in a greater way than you can outside of that interaction.
Yeah. I don't know about you. I quit. I lost track of how many times somebody said, "Wow, you're way taller than I thought."
I didn't get that a lot. I guess people assume I'm shorter than I am, or they just are really good at guessing my height, which is funny. I don't know if I've told this story, but I think people do underestimate my height. Even friends, we had this, Seth and Eric and I were together at an event in Minneapolis. This has been a few months ago, and we all got into an argument over who's taller, which is really funny.
I win. I think I've got it for the company right now.
Yeah, you're a pretty tall dude, Brad. Yeah, are you taller than Harmon?
Yep.
Yeah. I'd say you're the tallest guy in the company.
Take him on though. He would win 100%.
Yeah. Well, the most important question is, can you dunk a basketball?
I used to be able to. I'm now in my mid-40s with 3 kids. I can still grab the rim for sure. I don't know if I can dunk anymore.
Fair. I used to be able to dunk with a girls' basketball or a volleyball pretty easy. They're easier to palm. I could occasionally dunk a men's basketball, but I never really had the hand size to have a good palm on a men's basketball. But off an alley-oop, man, I could throw it
There you go.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Heck yeah. So holy vulnerability, man. This has
Oh,
been it's been wild since we last recorded, and
well,
there's a lot
yeah,
to cover today.
and not just little things either. These are like
Mm-hmm.
big.
Very significant. I guess right now there's really three big critical O-days that popped since I think one of them actually popped like as soon as we finished recording a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago, which is kind of funny. That's the way it always goes. So we may sound a little behind. Some of you guys, I'm sure, are going to be aware of this, but nonetheless, I think we should probably hit on each of these briefly so you guys are aware of them and know what to do. Where do we start, man?
I don't know. Why don't you start with Fortinet? Because I'll be honest, I'm not as up to speed on that one.
Okay, Fortinet, back in the news again. And I don't like to shame or talk down about any particular product, but holy crap. I feel like Fortinet is always in the news. Time after time, we see these critical vulnerabilities that are being patched or, more importantly, being exploited in their devices. And this one, again, is like the ones we've seen previously where it's taking advantage of the SSL VPN. We've seen so many of these. And I think I've told the story on here before about how we still discover that CVE from 2018 that was an RCE for a vulnerability in their VPN, SSL VPN. That's kind of still in the wild. We'll stumble across that sometimes. And so just add another one to the list. This one's CVE 2023 279997. This is another critical remote code execution vulnerability. And from my understanding, it's essentially all Fortinet devices are vulnerable if you are utilizing the SSL VPN function. So if you are using SSL VPN, you are vulnerable. The good news is they've released patches for this. They've actually released a whole OS update. So you should be deploying that ASAP. The challenge I see with a lot of Fortinet devices in our client base and just in the ecosphere in general is that I see that a lot of ISPs that have managed services like deploying these devices. And so sometimes you may not have control or access to your device to apply that update immediately. And so make sure if you're in that case that you are communicating with your service provider and get their game plan on patching that device. More importantly, though, we know this one was exploited in the wild as well. And so I'd say it's even more important that apply that patch, but investigate your device for indicators of compromise because there's a good chance that the device has been compromised and you need to understand if that has taken place, really forensically investigate that device and determine what you need to do to properly remediate that device. Now, this one I haven't really played around with the proof of concept yet. It's been a pretty busy couple of weeks for us to see what that data set looks like, but I know historically we were able to use the RCE capability to extract usernames, passwords on the device, even connections, as well as which groups those users are members of, and so on. So I'm not saying that's the case here, but I fully expect it is a likely case in this situation as well. So you may want to go through some user refreshment at that point, right? So refreshing usernames and passwords after you're patched, always making sure you got MFA implemented on that device to prevent authentication from our threat actors and all that fun stuff. So yeah, if you got a Fortinet, get on it real quick, I'd say.
Yeah. Wow. Fun.
Yeah.
Next one.
Yeah, that one's fun. There's more fun though. We're gonna roll through these because we got a few.
So I think MOVEit. We got to talk MOVEit.
I think so.
That's a global issue right now, and it just came out earlier that U.S. federal government agencies have been affected by this, and they're working to handle. CISA is working with different agencies on the intrusions affecting MOVEit applications.
Mm-hmm.
And, that one I know originally broke last week.
June the 2nd is when that one was actually published. It's been almost 2 weeks now.
So,
and yeah, maybe some background for folks too on what MOVEit is if you're unaware. MOVEit essentially is just a managed file transfer system. It's very popular to share files between business and client and so forth. And there is a pretty wide adaptation of this tool throughout business infrastructures.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's the flop ransomware gang out of Russia. The big news originally was BBC and British Airways employee data was compromised, and now it's coming out. We've seen that they've given till what was it? So yesterday, I think, was the
I think
original
so.
date
Yeah.
that the ransomware gang was saying, "Hey, you better reach out to us, or we're going to start selling." And
Mm-hmm.
they were very generous. They said you could select a random sample of files, and they could provide those to you to prove they had it. Oh, well, isn't that nice of them?
Yeah, and this is kind of like that pattern we've talked about before, where they're not destroying your data at this point. They're
Nope.
exfiltrating your data, and then they're using that exfiltrated data to essentially extort you for money at that point. This one too follows a similar pattern, and I want to make sure everyone understands this, that we've seen in previous vulnerabilities such as Log4j and proxy logon, the array of proxy logon exploits, where the initial vulnerability that's exploited is utilized to then drop a web shell onto that
Yep.
device for persistent access. And so while CLOP has been very diligent in targeting high profile or high value clients at this point, I think it would be worth considering that even if you're not in that first array of those businesses that are
Mhm.
known to be compromised at this point,
Yeah.
it's still worthwhile to investigate your device and make sure that you don't have the web shell, essentially.
I mean, honestly, at this point, if I'm using MOVEit, I assume I'm compromised until I can prove
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, right? Like,
Yeah,
I think you have to.
100%. And that's a key. And so it's really interesting. We see these vulnerabilities happen every year, right? Where the method of persistent access is going to be a backdoor web shell.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned Log4j, I mentioned proxy logon. And it is inevitable that there are always victims who are compromised that are unaware of that compromise, and they patch their systems and they don't even think about it anymore. And then 6 months later, they have a more significant incident.
Yeah. One of the articles I was reading, the security researcher or whatever that they had interviewed said this is going to be like a Log4j or
Mm-hmm.
Log4Shell. This is going to persist for years.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm pulling up some statistics. This is interesting of all the cases, and I've mentioned this on here before. I'm working on our FRSecure annual information security report right now, and part of that is analyzing our incident response and digital forensics data from last year. And so, of all the cases that we worked, let me pull up my notes on this so I can uh, speak factually right now. So I do have some statistics, and this
70% of all
is
statistics are made up, Oscar.
that's true, and these are probably made up too. I don't know. I'm trying my best not to make them up and base them on science and math, But so of all the engagements last year, 27% of those were the result of an exploited known vulnerability. And that's significant. I mean, we really have seen exploited vulnerabilities trend up in the last couple of years. But even more interesting is the percentage of those that were known vulnerability. We had around, let's see here, close to 50% of those were still related to Log4j or proxy logon. And so think about that, right? It
Yeah.
proves my point exactly that these victims were actually victimized when this vulnerability first broke, because the method attackers use when this happens and an exploit becomes available is we're going to scan the internet or use the internet scanners that are already out there, Census and Shodan, to identify
Mm-hmm.
all the systems that are potentially vulnerable to this. And then we're going to deploy our exploit and deploy our backdoor. We're initially going to work through our high target or high value victims because they're most likely to have the means to pay us or most likely to have a process in place for responding to these events. So as an attacker, our likelihood of payment significantly increases. But when they're through that list, they just keep working through the tiers. And if they do
Yep.
have that back door, they're either we'll do one of two things. They're either going to eventually get to you and continue that exploit to have significant impact through the incident, or they're going to sell your access to someone else.
Yeah.
And so it's critical. If you guys have these devices, hunt the devices, make sure that you assume that if you have that device, like Brad said, you've already been exploited. And now we need to not only patch, but work through proper remediation of that device. And if you have been exploited, it's really important, so you have the web shell, to see if that web shell has been utilized. And there are methods that forensic experts can use to determine if the web shell is there, has the web shell actually been interacted with? And that's a key piece of information. If it has been interacted with, we probably need to do a full incident response engagement, and you need to understand if they've exfiltrated data, if they've been able to laterally move throughout your environment, or implement other persistence mechanisms as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So just crazy to think about. And then, talking about assumed breach, I mean, that really leads us right into the next article. News story is Barracuda email gateways that were compromised. And
yeah,
so that originally, they discovered the bug May 19th. Turns out that Chinese spies were behind the data stealing malware going back as far as October of 22. So 7 months before they were notified. And then, so the day after that they discovered the critical bug, Barracuda pushed a patch to all affected products the following day, which that's amazingly fast.
Mm-hmm.
To discover it and patch it in a day. But then last week they came out and said, you know what? If you were infected, even if you've patched, take it offline, get it out immediately, remove it from your network. Which, I'll be honest, I've been thinking, I don't know if I can remember another example of a security company saying, take your infected device completely, take it offline, it's impacted. We'll send you a free one as a replacement.
I don't think I've ever seen this happen before.
Yeah, it's insane.
And so there's some things that probably could be inferred from that method, right? So they did push the patch, but are we assuming that again, like kind of what I'm talking about before, that patch probably isn't going to remediate a device that's already been backdoored?
Yeah,
right.
I agree. I think that's what it was. It's saying, hey, they've got persistence that we can't remediate.
Yeah, and so this was, and I'm not as familiar with this one. I think you're a little more familiar with me, but from what I understand, right? So the devices were actually exploited through an email that had a malicious tar attachment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that tar attachment was, I assume, scanned by the email gateway, and as part of its processing of that, the vulnerability took advantage of something in that integrity check process by the gateway to actually exploit the gateway.
Yeah. They intentionally used poor grammar, generic subjects, so that it would get sent straight to the junk, so it didn't get the full analysis. It was junked before they scanned the malware. And so three pieces of malware: saltwater, C-Spy, and Seaside to backdoor the appliance.
Yeah, so they all, but all the exploits, right, essentially just create a reverse shell. So you could use this exploit on the device to get a reverse shell, and then the attackers are able to use that reverse shell to access and deploy their secondary payload, which is another backdoor. And it sounds like they discovered 3 different backdoors associated with that.
Which, it's, you got your persistence mechanism, your ability to upload files, and then steal the data. And what's surprising to me is, so Barracuda brought Mandiant in, and Mandiant actually said, Mandiant's recommendation is organizations should hunt for indicators of compromise within their networks, and they've provided those network IOCs, but that's a pretty significant step from them to say, for them to come out and say, hey, look, not only was your data compromised with these devices, but there's a good chance your network has been compromised. So again, kind of almost unprecedented from a security product company to be that forthcoming with it.
For sure. And that's how I understand too. One of the 3 different payloads that were identified here actually contained a rootkit as well. I think which goes back as supporting evidence for what we're talking about. So if you had a significant number of these devices that were rooted and that rootkit was successfully deployed, there's a lot of liability on Barracuda if they're saying, hey, deploy this patch or upgrade the OS or whatever. And even if they have those IOCs, rootkits can be very difficult to clean from a device. And so I'm guessing that's probably why they said, let's pull the trigger and get these offline and replace everyone's devices.
I mean, I like that they're doing that, and reading through their IOC list, it's pretty comprehensive. It's a fairly large list of IOCs.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll be honest, it's refreshing to see them come out and say, hey, you know what? We're not trying to smoke screen. This is bad. Get them off. We're going to take care. We're going to give you a replacement that's not compromised.
Mm-hmm.
Because how often do we see trying to hide any sort of liability by these companies when there's a device where their software is exploited?
Yeah, I'll give some kudos to Barracuda here for doing the right thing. I think that's unprecedented, as you said, and it's good.
Yeah, I think realistically, still they're in business to make money. That's what businesses are in for. And yeah, so to some extent, it's like, hey, here's our options, which is going to be the least painful. And for them to say, we're going to replace however many thousands of these devices is the least painful is pretty telling how bad it could have been.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So is this all of the ESGs? As the entire Barracuda line of ESGs?
They said they were handling a subset. I can't remember what the exact percentage was.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at that the other day, and 11,000 that are that have that daemon on it, but it could be other devices as well. So, it could be, I mean, could be inflated, but about 10,000 devices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty significant impact for sure.
So
cool. Yeah. So I will give a plug too for folks that are listeners. If you're unaware of our initiative, Project HiFi, while there was a lapse for us reporting these things on the podcast here, these things usually hit our threat feed on Project HiFi rather quickly. You can find more information about all of these up there. And the website for that is projecthifi.com. I'm going to spell that because it is confusing for everybody. Project is, as you would imagine, PROJECT. HiFi is spelled HYPHAE.com. I'll try to get a link to that in our show notes as well, so you guys can get there. But if you're unaware of that initiative, check it out. It's a really cool thing that we do that's all volunteer based. And one of those things is a threat feed that's free. And so based on our insight, cases we work, and the data that we culminate through our engagements with consulting, we try to identify those threats that are going to be most relevant to our, I would say our listeners, our subscribers, but really just anyone we do business with, right? And trying to help you guys stay ahead of those threats. So tune into that if you can. And then we also do some free threat hunting for people. And you can check out those initiatives on there as well. It's not a pen test. You don't get a full report. But if you're in a situation where maybe you can't afford a pen test or you can't afford any even vulnerability assessments right now, like it's a good stopgap to have experts volunteer their time and come in and say, yeah, cool. We'll look at your external footprint and we'll give you guidance back on some things that we see that you should be working to reduce your risk.
Yeah. And I would say the guys that do the posting, a lot of it is from the blue team, and they thoroughly enjoy when I post something that they've already got on HiFi. I'm like, what? I don't know, just put it up today. How did you post it 2 days ago? Different site.
And we get fun with those titles, like the MOVEit one. The title to the article is "Hackers Like to Move It, which is funny. And we used to use a lot of memes on there, but we kind of got in trouble over our memes, not internally, but apparently there's an initiative right now for some companies to sue other companies that are using images for memes that are copyrighted and they don't have permission to do so. So yeah, be careful with your memeing out there, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not worth it. But no, yeah, and what's crazy is we talked about those three. There's so many others that came out. Like the U.S. just arrested somebody, a Russian national, for deploying Lockbit. Right? We didn't even get a chance to talk about that. There's
Mm-hmm.
uh, just so much that's gone on
Yeah. I
in the
don't know if you've
last
seen
couple of
this
weeks.
too, but it was also reported this week that Lockbit received $91 million
I saw
in
that
payouts from United States-based organizations.
in the
Holy
last two
moly.
years.
Yeah, that's insane, man.
Yeah, I
And
saw
so
that.
people wonder how these organizations and these APTs are so good at what they do and so efficient at what they do. That's why they're making the money to build the infrastructure and the team.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun telling you guys all sorts of bad news. Maybe we should end this on like something positive. So,
Yeah.
how about we give some shout outs or even just a piece of positive news? What's something positive you got on your mind, Brad?
I'll give a shout out to our HR team, Amy and Amber, and event planner Carly for just a phenomenal event and how great it was to see everyone again. I know I was completely beat on Saturday after 2 days in the office and a
Mm-hmm.
party. And I was like, this is more people than I've seen in person or interacted with in like 3 years. Whoa. But I had so much fun and they did a phenomenal job setting that up.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Kudos to them as well. Party was great, huge success, and the karaoke was a smash, man.
Oh
It
my
was
God.
it was awesome. We had people singing karaoke like all evening long, and it
Yeah.
was kind of surprising. I seen some people get up there and they had some chops, man, and like Drew especially really surprised me. He got up and sang "Sweet Child of Mine" early in the night, and I was like, "There's no
I
way
thought
he can pull this off," but he kind of
no,
nailed it. So
he did.
hope he's
I thought
not
he was
listening
going
to
to
this
pass
right
out a little
now.
bit.
Yeah, I thought he could pass out too. Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to our team. Everyone that was able to take time out of their schedules, take the time to travel to Minneapolis and spend time with me and each other and everyone. It was super awesome to get to see everybody out there. And I even met a couple spouses that listened to this and listened to the Hacklebox as well. And like, that means the world to me. So I appreciate that support too. So yeah, shout out to you all. We have the best team, and we
Really
have these
do.
events we're able to get together. It really does just prove that even more in my mind and cement that even more. And so we're in a special place, and I think we're all lucky to be part of this.
100% agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Thanks everybody for tuning in again, and we will talk to you again soon. Have a great day. See ya.